Well, I went to the store and I found exactly 2 X-Men characters. And thankfully, it's the 2 I was the most excited to get. Don't get me wrong, I want to get Storm and Rogue and probably Gambit at some point, but these were the 2 I were really holding out hope that I'd be able to find. From Hasbro Marvel Legends, specifically their X-Men 97 line, this is Magneto, the Master of Magnetism, and Wolverine, that one guy who's in everything. 2 of my favorite Marvel characters. Magneto is probably my absolute favorite Marvel character, so I was really excited to find these guys, mostly because I don't feel like I've ever had a good Magneto. I feel like every Magneto always has some problem, right? So I'm holding out hope that this is going to be the one that I can put on the shelf and be like, yes, that's the Magneto that's just going to always be there now, which would be nice, seeing as how I've been able to do that with basically all the other characters I like. Taking a look at Wolverine first, and my first thoughts are, this is the Wolverine I've been waiting for in my collection. Like, when I close my eyes, this is the Wolverine I picture. And it's just perfect for me. I think it's a wonderful recreation of his animated look, especially his tiger stripe look. And once again, just for me, when I think of Wolverine, this is the look. This is the costume. This is how I want him on my collection shelf. I know there are people who are huge fans of more of the brown suit. There are people who prefer, like, street clothes Wolverine. And on my shelf, up until this point, I've always just used the Hugh Jackman Wolverine from the X-Men movie line. But this is the Wolverine I've been wanting, and it feels so good. I think they captured his proportions perfectly. He's a good bit shorter than most Marvel Legends figures. You have a ball joint up here at the head, as well as the hinge. You have a huge diaphragm joint. Look at how far forward you go, and how far back. You have a waist joint. Up here you have a butterfly joint and a universal at the shoulder, and the shoulder pads can go up and down to accommodate. You have a swivel at the upper arm, pinless double jointed elbows, universal at the wrist. You of course have the claws. You have a universal at the hip. You have a thigh cut. You have pinless double jointed knees even. Oh, come on. Go for me. Go for me. There we go. And then you have a universal / ankle rocker down at the ankle. This guy, it's the standard articulation we'd expect for a Marvel Legends. It's not breaking new ground in that regard, but I feel like occasionally we kind of take for granted just how well Marvel Legends figures can pose. Like, I just did a review of a Star Wars figure, and it was so much of a headache to, get them into any type of look. Meanwhile, Wolverine, I messed with him for 2 seconds, oh, what do you know, I got him into a cool kind of action pose, or at least a decent stance. Wolverine comes with a few accessories. Of course, he comes with an unmasked head. I love how tired he looks. The bags under his eyes come out really well. And the hair is a bit wild, but again, I think that's great. And this head, you have a kind of down Wolverine cowl to put with it. You don't need to put it on with this head, it just is a separate piece, but I think that's a great touch. And also, you have 2 alternate hands that have the claws unpopped. So they give you a few different moods or a few different variations you can do with this figure. If I had to say what's one accessory I think you could have really used, right? I would have preferred a masked head or maybe an unmasked head that had teeth gritting and was angry. Or maybe a masked head that was battle damaged. That said, for what you get, I think you actually do get quite a few different accessories that work really well for the Wolverine. So, again, I think you could have done an alternate head. I think that for what you pay for this figure, because I think it goes for $25, the alternate, a third head would have been very nice. But you do get enough, considering everything you do get in the package. I also really do want to point out his hairy arms. As you can see, there's some light coloring in there, but mostly it's just sculpt, and it really does give you the impression that Wolverine is just covered in hair. Now we get to the single figure I was the most excited for out of this wave, Magneto. Magneto is my favorite Marvel character. Magneto is one of my favorite comic book characters. Magneto is a character who, every variation and version, I think that there's something interesting, and I adore just seeing how they reinvent him, how they change him, how they modernize him. But, unfortunately, Magneto is one of those characters that has always had a rough time with action figures. He's had decent ones, to be sure. I'm thinking of the X-Men Classics one, the all black and red one, the Age of Apocalypse Magneto. But in terms of just his normal, standard costume, right? I don't think he's ever had a good figure. The Diamond Select had bad articulation. All the Marvel Legends ones before this one were either outrageously expensive or just don't have what you really want from the figure. The Mayfax one looks great. Head's a bit too small. So this is the Magneto that I was looking at the promo pics and I was thinking, maybe, just maybe, this is the Magneto for my collection. Let's see. The first thing I noticed with the promo pics, and I have to assume that this was the same for a lot of people, was the eyes. Because in the promo pics, you notice that they've painted the eyes to be black to kind of imply shade under the helmet. And I know a lot of people were worried about it, but I was hopeful because McFarlane did Joker the Comedian, and they did a very similar effect where they basically painted half his face completely black in order to simulate the look of his hat putting shadow on him. And just like that figure, I think this figure nails it. It looks so good to me. I adore how much more menacing, and in all honesty, how much more worn it makes Magneto look. He looks so tired due to how they've painted him here. The head sculpt itself is just spectacular. You have the spitting image of the animated Magneto in that head sculpt. The helmet is perfect. They have all the details, the shiny purple paint, the kind of scarab-esque design on the front of the crest. It goes all the way around. To me, the single most important thing on an action figure is, did you nail the head sculpt? Can I see the character I want in your portrait? This is just spectacular. I'm going to keep saying that, I'm sorry. It's wonderful. Going down from there, you have the chest buckles here for the cape clasps. I think that's great too. I love how they remembered the cape has to flow up and then down. It's a wonderful little design of Magneto that not many people seem to appreciate, but it does give Magneto an even more iconic silhouette, and it also bulks him up a bit more. I will say the torso, I think, is maybe just a bit too thin. I know that sounds crazy, but Magneto is supposed to be barrel-chested. He's supposed to have an inflated chest to show that he's constantly, like, puffing his chest out. He's very proud, to a fault. I think that's a bit too thin, but goddamn, that is the most nitpick of nitpicks. What's not more of a nitpick is on the gloves, because the joint, they could not complete his purple. It's fine, it doesn't bother me, but it is technically inaccurate. In terms of articulation, we do have a ball joint at the head, we have a universal at the shoulder, we have an upper arm cut, we have the double jointed elbows, we have a universal at the wrist, we have an ab crunch go that far forward, that far back, got waist, universal at the hip, and by the way, I love how they captured his underwear there, thigh cut, double jointed knee, and a universal at the foot. So I'm messing around with this Magneto. I love it. I love it, I love it, I love it. And maybe this is a figure that I'm doing this review and I'm going to cool down on it, but just messing with it right now, it's the best feeling figure, the best time I've had with a figure in a while doing these reviews. It's just hitting every note I could have possibly wanted it to hit. Despite my gushing, there are issues. The cape is bulky, and that can make it very hard to balance Magneto. That's just a reality of this figure. I wish it was easier. Maybe they could have gone for a cloth cape, but then it would have been hard to get the curve unless you had a wire, so I understand, right? The other thing is, he comes with alternate hands, so he comes with fists, and his more open, kind of power-using hands, and then nothing. Like, keep in mind, Wolverine had alternate hands too, but he also had an alternate head. Magneto doesn't have an unmasked head, he doesn't have a helmet, he doesn't have effects for this figure. I would have loved to have gotten an unmasked head. I would have loved an unmasked head and then a separate helmet for him to hold. I think that would have really taken this figure over the next level. And yet, just looking at him, I'm sorry. It's the Magneto I've always wanted. It's the costume I've always wanted him in. and it looks so good. I don't know how the rest of this wave is going to turn out. I hope well, because these figures really have blown me away. But for my money, these are the best Marvel figures I've messed with all year. Like, I'm looking at my shelf now, trying to figure out, like, does anything rival? There's a few Spider-Man figures I also really enjoyed. But for what they personally represent to me, because the X-Men were one of the first teams I ever loved, they were my gateway into the Marvel Universe. X-Men the Animated Series was a cartoon I watched every morning before I went to school. There was a time in which my favorite superheroes of all time were Superman, Batman, Wolverine, and Beast. And Magneto is still my favorite supervillain / anti-hero in comics. So they mean more to me than even Spider-Man does. And getting these figures that so faithfully recapture that energy from the cartoon, it's just spectacular. So I full-heartedly recommend them. I think that they are just really well done figures. They're painted well, they're sculpted well, they look perfect. Aside from a handful of my nitpicks, I don't think you could go wrong picking these guys up.